Um, okay, you have to open up what?
It's a video, they see it.
They don't have to. We can put down a screen share, but like we need to create a thing. Can we make a? Right now there's 0 viewers. Okay, I want you to open it up from not from ours. Like do it from the second account. Can you do it from Tech Coach? And find this live video and join it, so we can see like what the comments are and stuff. We need to put up some sort of. Go to our channel. Go to if you're subscribed to Game of Thrones. Okay, so we need a better thumbnail.
I see it.
It's not exactly live though, it's a little delayed. I want to put up a sign that says like we're going to be starting in 10 minutes or something. Let's edit this thumbnail. Where is... What?
I just saw you click on here.
No, it's not right. Okay, where's we need age restrictions, video language. How do we edit the thumbnail? $20p stream. No. Really? Welcome to everyone who's here watching. We're just going to get started in a couple minutes. We're just we're going to start with the recap in a few. We're going to wait for a few people to come on. Up a little, basically trying to process what we just saw. That was pretty crazy. For those of you who are already joined us, if there's anything specific you want us to talk about, you could write it in the comments below and address things as they come to talk about after that episode. Are we going to show Game of Thrones? No, we're not going to show Game of Thrones. It's going to be a recap. To watch that, you're going to have to go to HBO or find some other way. Five watching. Okay. So, can we figure out how to change this? Is there no way to change this? Okay, so just hoping for a few more people to join. Let's yeah, crazy episode. Things are just kind of going crazy at this point. It's stopped, but I'm still here. Do you want to just go do a sound check and just step into the other room and because it's going to feedback if you turn it on. Okay. How do we edit this thumbnail? That was insane. Anyway, for everyone who's on here already, it's going to be spoilers. We just make a big slide with spoilers. Just as a spoiler warning. No, we're gonna I'm gonna invite you. I'm gonna invite you to the Hangout. Hangout people. I'm gonna send you this Hangout right now. Open it, and then oh no, turn off. Okay, so we've got our. Let's get our episode out. Pass me the remote. And let me load up these comments live as well. How do we run this all the way to the beginning? Page, so I could see the comments. Turn off the volume, of course. Okay, so we're getting our episode here. We want to have some good discussion about what's just gone down, what we think is happening next, about the direction that things are being taken. Some things really loved, some things didn't love so much. Okay, so okay, so we're just going back to the beginning of the episode. I guess the plan here is go through everything that happened in the episode. We'll stop and kind of recap the most important points, explain some of that points that might need a little bit of explaining, and then we'll also take any questions that come up on the stream. I see something. But I like it. Yeah, I think I pretty much felt the same way as well. Okay, so we'll just pause it at different points and kind of see. Yeah, so I mean, I guess let's just jump right into it. So I kind of felt like I definitely enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching this. It was a lot of fun and exciting, and but at the same time, I feel like the show has lost a little bit of that edge that it used to have that would really throw you off. And you know, we'll get into the details, but for example, um, we were watching, you know, when the Fellowship of people, they kind of went out north of the wall as this group, and I'm pretty sure the last episode was just 7 of them, and all of a sudden there's like 11, 12, 13 of them there, and pretty much the only ones that are dying are these people that we don't know, and of course, Barrick, Thoros, they're all doing pretty well for the most part. Of course, didn't totally end out that way, But I feel like earlier Game of Thrones, season 1, season 2, season 3, you would have just seen you would have seen Jorah die right there, like totally unexpectedly. So there's my mic back in. So yeah, so I mean, I definitely to expect so much anymore. But yeah, so we're going through. So the episode starts off, and basically you see this. They're walking, venturing north of the wall. At the end of episode 5, they walked out north of the wall into this complete whiteout zone, and now it looks a little clearer. We should get up this phone. We could show little clips or something. No, it's okay. Okay, so yeah, so the group is walking north, and you're kind of wondering what's about to happen here. It's kind of scary. You get this sense of that something really crazy is going to go down. So, I mean, yeah, what were you thinking during this first?
It seemed like they're all a little bit too chummy and
Yeah.
happy, considering the fact that they are basically walking out into unknown, into a land full of
dead people. Yeah, I mean, that was going on. They were kind of walking to all the dead people, walking to the heart of death, and you got they're just striking up these really superficial conversations even before walking north of the wall. Like, this whole idea is kind of just, what's with this idea? Like, they decided that if they could capture a white and show it to everybody south of the wall, aka the two queens, then the queen good, everyone would kind of come together to fight the White Walkers. But like, they basically have gone on this suicide mission that doesn't make much sense. Gendry is up there. He's never seen snow in his life. Thoros is just pounding booze. And Beric is talking to, he wants them. He has a purpose for them, but they don't know the purpose. Jon isn't really buying into it so much. He's not really willing to follow someone when the best they can tell him is, I don't know. So they're up there for a little while. They're walking around. All seems pretty good. Jorah's talking to Jon a bit. Jon actually offers Jorah his sword, House Mormont's sword, and it just seemed logical that he would give it back. Although it's Valyrian steel and extremely valuable, you would think that Jon might get another sword, maybe from his Targaryen ancestry. Maybe if he's supposed to be Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, maybe he would have, which might be a different sword. Maybe that'd be Dawn of House Dane. And yeah, so anyway, they're traveling up in the north. And then it cuts to Winterfell, where Arya is with Sansa, and she's giving this big speech about members being a kid there, and father used to watch us from up here where we're standing, and she tells this moving story about how she kind of did what she wasn't supposed to do and stole Bran's air a while, and then heard some clapping from up there when she finally hit a bullseye, and it was Ned standing up there. He had been watching her the whole time, and in that he had signaled to her that she, even though she was breaking the rules, she wasn't doing anything wrong. It wasn't her that was wrong, it were the rules that were wrong. And I found that to be a very powerful line. I think it's real of what we're going to expect to see later, where there are these rules, and Ned Stark was so honorable, but yet sometimes the rules are flawed and you're supposed to be doing something else. Sansa's note that she was forced to write by the Lannisters, denouncing her father and telling her brother of the North at the time, Robb Stark, she was telling him to come down and bend the knee, and it was really just a trap. And Arya sees this as a total betrayal. Why did you betray our family? How could you do that? Sansa is trying to defend herself and say I was a little girl. I was forced to do it. I didn't have a choice. And yeah, so okay, so we just got another question on the live stream. Do you think Jon will get back this season? There's one more episode left. That's a great question. Will Jon get back this season? But I'm not really sure what's going to happen. There are so many storylines going on, and for some reason they're going to try to go down to King's Landing, which I just think is a terrible idea. But
I'm just going to chime in here.
Yeah.
Just a second person at the Game of Thrones couch. I actually don't think I think right now from the rest is going to be by design so that relationship can develop a little bit more, because we see that sparks are flying. That's just my opinion. I don't think that they're going to go back to Winterfell. Also because they're really building up Sansa-Arya rival. Sansa, we'll get to that, but Sansa sending away Brienne and all these things. So I just think that they are going to let Jon be out of the picture for a little bit while the storyline develops. And speaking of the storyline with Sansa and Arya, I'm not such a huge fan of it. I think it's a little bit. Actually, before we get, what do you think, Lincoln? Do you think Jon's going to make it back to Winterfell this season?
Yeah, so it might be a couple seconds delayed, so you might hear that, and if you will definitely wait to hear your answer on that. Of the plot and the story writing, that makes a lot of sense. Like, there's this thing developing at Winterfell that they're going to want to play out. I don't really get this whole thing between Sansa and Arya. It almost feels like filler, but on the other hand, yeah, it seems like they want that to develop, and they've got the Jon, Dany story separate going on. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I guess I really want him to. I don't know what's going to happen next episode. Something huge is going to happen. But
yeah, so I guess back to the Sansa and Arya little rivalry playing on. I don't really see where it's going to go. Like, each other. The biggest thing is just that Littlefinger is going to play them off each other. But I just honestly, I'd rather see things that are going to things that are just kind of fillers, which I think this is one of them. And after, reading all the books and seeing the intricacies of how all the stories work, I feel like they're included other than this like sisterly rivalry.
Yeah, and it seems weird to me because like some parts of the story are moving so quickly now. It's like they've had to a bit. I feel like they're cutting corners in all these places because are there these key points in the story arc they need to get to, and so I'm really all this. And as we're talking right now, maybe what I'm thinking is maybe this plays bigger into the whole story than we think. In the books, there's a big deal about how Sansa and Arya never really got along, and they're always at ends, and maybe there's something that needs to happen here. In any event, I don't know. Definitely, one of the slower parts of the story where I hope they would be adding. I hope they'd be adding more of the fast. Yeah, yeah, it's a little bit delayed, but also really wide. Okay, so moving on, then in the next scene, and keep dropping your questions. We really want this to be a discussion. There's a few themes that are going to come up, and try to really talk those out. But the cutting corners, about this really fast plot line, yeah. So then we go back to the contingent that's north of the wall, and they're moving fast. Seems like they've been, although things that happen later in the episode kind of make us question that. You going on now with the Hound, and yeah. So with the Hound and Tormund are bantering, and Tormund is just hilarious with his smiles and the way he's totally into Brienne. And he's talking about it. The Hound, of course, knows her. And this banter kind of continues. So we've got another question. Let's take. What do you think, Mary? It's a good question. I mean, I think they're trying to keep that. I'm getting the impression like they're trying to keep that out of your mind. They don't want you to think about that. It seems like it's obvious that him and Dany have some sparks flying, and seems like something's going to go on there, the two of them.
Are being built up to be the power couple in the show, and I guess kind of like Dany and Jon versus like Cersei and Jaime maybe, but at the same time, they're really putting this emphasis on particularly about and maybe that's not going to play into the story because maybe the lineage needs to be from Jon.
Or maybe Jon can make her have children the way he came back from the water.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
The interactions between Dany and Jon are so interesting. It's been the part of season 7 that's definitely touched me the deepest. And they're healing him, and then they take his shirt off, and he's got all those scars on his chest from being stabbed in the heart. And you're kind of just sitting there thinking, like, she's got to be, what's going through her head? She's wondering, like, okay, so it goes north of the wall, capture a White Walker, which is nuts. That was after he, came and saw her at Dragonstone. So he's willing to do that. He runs into a throng of them as she runs off with her. And then it turns out that when they're healing him, because he somehow makes it back, turns out that she discovers, oh, wait, he really was stabbed in the heart. And as that was happening, I'm just thinking to myself, who is this guy? So those sparks have definitely been interesting. I think they're going to end up together, but it might not be as happy as we would imagine around. But yeah, what do you think? Can you see Jon ending up with anyone else? He's definitely a hot catch right now, except that he's looking pretty short these days. Let us know in the comments if you think you could picture Jon ending up with anyone else. But yeah, I think it's definitely building towards that. I don't think George or the writers of the show are going to fully give us. It's too classic fairy tale for Game of Thrones.
Which now this series, now that they're off book, it's more plebeians I'm finding since
they don't have
the
material,
twisted George R. R. Martin behind there.
Yeah, so Yeah, I thought that's another one of those themes that I think we're going to talk about is kind of what's been going on different, the earlier parts of the show where you had Ned Stark dying and the Red Wedding, those were just like crazy loot busters. But like, I feel like, you're not going to or Danny, like kind of a lot of the main characters are really, are staples. But yeah, so we just got that comment from Lincoln. These person read the books, they're all each other think about. Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting.
Because he's not her sister.
He's not her sister. He's not her brother, and they always had this very special relationship. He kind of took care of her, looked after her when she kind of fell through the cracks. Everyone was focused on Sansa. Before he left Winterfell to go to the Night's Watch, he had given her a sword, needle. He made that for her. And he doesn't even know that she's alive. He hasn't seen her yet. So that's definitely also when they see each other for the first time. They had a very special place for each other, and vice versa. Arya was always the sibling where Rob did, but she really accepted him. And yeah, that'd be really interesting.
A side note that I just thought of is that Bran was not in this episode, which is interesting because he's really been in this season very little. He's kind of just showed up and been like, okay, I saw what you've been through, but what I'm guessing is that either in the next episode or definitely in the next season, he is going to be playing a huge role because he really has all the parts. He has all the parts that are
power. He's got a ton of power that we don't know how to use, that he doesn't know how to use yet, and he knows about all this history. He knows about Jon and his parents. He knows about what happened, everything, and I wonder if they're just kind of going to use him as this way to get to that information. He'll be the one to reveal certain things about Jon Snow's parents and whatnot, or
well in this episode either.
Yeah, it really was jumping back and forth between Dany and Tyrion at Dragonstone, the contingent north of the Wall. But yeah, let's see. So we got another comment. Yeah, I think Bran could have helped with the battle. So that was a comment on the agree. There was part of the episode about halfway through where the words just went through my head where, where's Bran? Where's he been? Because he definitely could have there was that scene where where he was controlling all those birds. He could have had those birds fly in and do something. And we're at Winterfell. Hey, this is what's going on over there. They're stuck in the middle of a frozen lake, and they have no way of getting out. Because the way they ended up getting saved was pretty fortuitous, very lucky, and it really shouldn't have happened. But considering that Bran's there with all that, a little bit more of a role. So yeah, that was kind of surprising. He just kind of absent, and Bran in total this whole season has just been more. He's part of the hive-minded werewood net system. Three-eyed ravens or whatever. So he's like not human anymore. So yeah, good point with that. in the show in terms of going through. We have this great conversation between Dany and Tyrion, and they're talking about what should we do. And Tyrion's trying to think all long term, and even at one point out, what kind of succession is there going to be? And really, what he's getting at is that things are so unstable right now, and there happens to be this one incredible leader, Dany, who wants all the right things. She's got people believe in her, and she's got a vision. So the question is, what what's going to happen if she suddenly dies? Everything's going to fall apart. And Dany, it's not about you. It's and building this new world. So he's trying to kind of prepare for the future properly. And she's really just happens, I'm not going to do nothing and let these guys die out there. Well, that's a little bit later on in the episode. But she's, putting up. Then it jumps back to north of the wall, and this was the scene where there's this giant bear out in the it's a White Walker bear, and it approaches them, and they fight with it, and Thoros gets like bit in the stomach and gets into all this trouble. Beric and Thoros got their swords on fire, and eventually they take this thing down, and somehow Thoros walks away. I think sword and like burned his wounds closed. I don't know if you caught that.
Yeah.
And then he just gets up, has a few drinks. So that was.
But another thing that I thought was about that scene is that, or just in general, is I really thought that the White Walkers would be more afraid that it wouldn't just be something that kills them, but they'd actually be afraid of it. That's just something I would have thought.
Yeah. In the books, when the White Walkers bust, and we saw a little bit of that here, but I guess they're just the White Walkers are controlled by the Night's King, and they're just
yeah.
I mean, one thing that for White Walkers, these dead soldiers, like they weren't really that aggressive and strong. There was one scene where they're trying to pull Tormund into the water, and he had like 6 of them on him, and I was like, come on, how strong are these whites?
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be able to like take him in by now? But maybe they're really. You're talking about these epic warriors, Tormund, Jon Snow, that they really hold their own, and that the whites weren't much of a big deal to them. So then we get back to Winterfell, and we have Sansa, and she's talking to Littlefinger, and that maybe they, she's filling him in on the Arya situation, and he suggests that maybe Brienne could help alleviate the situation. She's sworn to protect both of them. She planned for one of them by the other, and so I thought that actually made sense as a plan.
But why is he helping? Is he trying? I thought from last episode, it seemed like he wanted to pit them against each other. So I'm grasp on Littlefinger's role in the plot is I don't really understand what he's trying to do and how
What's going on. Just to go a little more into that, I mean, he's clearly still playing, but it's weird because he knows that the whites are there, he knows what's going down, and yet he's still playing these games to the point. What are you doing? You're kind of contradicting yourself. You're trying to cause trouble with them, and then you're trying to make peace between them. I think he's just trying to, and like this is his way of manipulating it. Somehow he's, you know, saying that they should get Brienne.
But I found it very interesting, and I'll just skip ahead, that he suggested to have Brienne involved, and then some this letters to me.
Yeah. So
Is she onto him? Thinking,
is she on? Yeah, exactly. Is she onto him, or is she? Yeah, but that was definitely something I was thinking about. Playing at something. I mean, we'll find a lot more about that now. But like, if he knows about the Whites and knows that death is coming for him, why is he still playing the Game of Thrones? Thinks that at some point he might try to make a deal with them. But anyway, it's part of one of the big mysteries. What's at these are two big players that we really don't know. So back north of the wall, you have you know, they took out this giant White Walker bear, and Thoros just, you know, all he needs is to just drink a little more booze and he's good. And Jorah helps him with that, and they're climbing up this mountain, and then they see a group of Whites walking below, led by one of the others. So there's the others, capital O others, those are the White Walkers, and then there's the Whites, which are the, you know, like the dead people that they raise back to the dead and have fight for them. But it's like there's only a bunch of these White Walkers who kind of have all the power and have those magical ice swords. So they see this group watching, and then they stumble, the White Walkers stumble upon a bonfire. So they approach this bonfire, and we were sitting here freaking out. We're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Turns out it was a trap set by the Fellowship, and all of a sudden, with these Whites standing behind a White Walker, they all run, the Fellowship runs out, and they enter into battle. Jon's going up against this White Walker with his ice sword versus the Valyrian steel sword. One of the Whites is choking out Jorah. You got Beric and Thoros with their ice swords, swinging them around, and then Jon takes out the White Walker, and all of the Whites just fall.
Yeah, they all fall conveniently except for one, which that made no sense to me. Like, why did one survive? And they were like, it conveniently helps the plot advance because they're able to capture one White Walker. Well, sorry, one White.
Yeah.
That was like very much like them just, you know, finding a loophole and breaking a little bit of the logic.
Well, what I thought, so my first thought about that was, wow, how convenient. Only one of them stays standing, and they need one of them alive. Because they all fell down, lost their life, and you're like, oh, crap, like that just did nothing. They made this huge, brave thing, and now they don't even have anything to come away with. But I think that what it was is that each of the White Walkers can raise the dead, and then those dead are bound to them. So that one White Walker maybe was the one controlling all of them except for one.
I still think it's a little far-fetched.
Yeah, definitely a little far-fetched. It's another one of those things, in my opinion, where they're cutting the corners by, you know, they could have made this happen in a way that made more sense, that was more likely, but, you know, for the purpose of advancing the plot, it was just kind of like,
I mean, the whole thing again doesn't make sense. So they would like to capture one individual White Walker and bring them back. Like,
yeah, the whole plan was kind of flawed, because, you know, where were they going to find a single White Walker? So then they find a group of 15 Whites with one White Walker, and sure enough, one out of those, you know, 14 Whites isn't controlled by that White Walker. Like, yeah, pretty unlikely. But in any event, they capture this White. They start running because they see that they're being approached by a whole throng of Whites and White Walkers. Next thing you know, they're on this frozen lake, and it starts to crack. And then you have thousands of dead Whites running at them. They're running across this frozen, cracking lake, and they get to this mountain, this little rock in the middle, or maybe a little island. And then the lake starts to conveniently crack right then, right behind our group.
It was a very Exodus moment, splitting of the sea, to me.
Yeah, and so they get to this rock, and all of a sudden they're being surrounded, they're encircled, they're pretty screwed, and then the water starts cracking, and all these whites just go flying in, and you're wondering, are those whites dying? Are they going to be able to come out? We know from a couple seasons ago, the episode Hard Home, where John went north of the wall to that small village and got, basically that got totally wiped out by the whites, and that ended with the Night King raising them all from the dead as John rode off into the distance. We know that they couldn't go in the water then, so seems as though there's something with the water that's holding them back. Then, so what you find is that the group is now stuck in the middle of this frozen lake, and then it cuts to Gendry, who's running. Before that, John said to him, "You're the fastest one out of all of us. Like, run back to Eastwatch, send a raven to Daenerys, and tell her what's happened." Which, again, like, how's that a plan to get out of there? Like, for him to get back, you'd think it would take days because they've been journeying off for a while, but he's running. You'd think it would take him a while to get back. Then after that, they've got to send a raven. Then Dany's got to get the raven and then get to them. Like, that's just not really much of a plan, but that's what they do. And then then it cuts back to them sitting in the middle of this frozen pond, totally surrounded by blue eyes and black figures. Pretty scary, very cold. How are they going to stay alive? Even if they made some plan and everything works out and gets back to Dany, seems very unlikely. Of course, Gendry collapses right in front of the wall.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Pretty dramatic.
Pretty dramatic. Can't make it one step further, 10 steps further, but lucky for everyone, he's right there. The wall opens up. Some of the Night's Watch come running after him and bring him in. And first thing he says is, "Raven." Got to send out that raven. And
also, I thought it was pretty ridiculous that they sent him back without any weapons. They took his weapon from him.
Yeah, they took his hammer from him, which I also thought was...
Or maybe he had like a...
Well, no, basically, the Hound grabbed it from him. Was it the Hound or Tormund? And he
said you're faster without it.
Yeah, he couldn't run back with that, but yeah, I mean, he was totally unarmed. I guess, though, what whites would be south of them at that point? I don't know. Anyway, they're taking some chances here because they don't have much to work from. And to be honest, they had this really, really silly plan, and it worked out pretty much perfectly. So I'm not sure what they were expecting. It couldn't have worked out any better than this. So then it's morning out north of the wall in the middle of this frozen lake, and Beric realizes that Thoros, the Red Priest, is dead. He's frozen. Can't bring him back to life. Can't leave him there. So they have to burn him. And so they do that. The Hound tries to drink his alcohol. And then they're like, nope, we got to burn him. And so then they burn him. And that's that. Then the Hound decides to get smart. And he starts tossing rocks at the whites across the lake. And what was the scene?
Where she gets invited to King's Landing.
Yeah, so Sansa gets invited to King's Landing, and then she sends Brienne for some reason. She's not doing what Littlefinger said, even though it totally makes sense. She must be onto him. She must be saying, like, wow, he gave me a plan that totally makes sense, but I know him and he's up to something and he's trying to do something. So, so that's that. And she sends Brienne. Brienne really doesn't want to go, but it happens. Then Dany decides that she's going to go with her dragons after she gets the message. And then you have the group back in the middle of the ice lake. And the Hound is throwing these rocks. And they're basically, one of them just sits there in the middle of the frozen pond. And then the whites start walking across the frozen lake. They figure it's not cracking anymore. So they start charging, and so basically what you got all of a sudden is the fellowship of the White Walker. They're all standing out there fighting hundreds and hundreds of whites that are just running towards them as they are standing in the middle, kind of out of luck.
And you see also Tormund at this point gets dragged into the water, and the Hound is actually the one that saves him, and it shows that, you know, this camaraderie that's developed and this friendship. But pretty much they just look screwed. Like, I'm shocked that they are still alive at this point, when obviously Q and the dragon.
And so all of a sudden, you know, they're about to get mauled by a whole group, and then Dragonfire shows up with just enough time for Jon to duck below it, and it starts taking out all these whites that are all around them, and Dany reaches for Jon, but he's too short, so he can't get up there. He goes back to fight some more as they start loading up all these people and the captured white on the White Walker. And then you got this White Walker hands the Night King this giant spear, and you're like, uh-oh, this ain't going to be good. And the Night King just is walking towards them slowly by slowly. Jon's taking out tons of whites. And then so then the Night King throws this spear at one dragon, and it goes down,
falls
into the water and disappears through the ice. And Dany's obviously heartbroken, and Jon just says, he sees the Night King loading up another spear and just says, "Get out of here." And Dany flies away, just barely evades the spear that he throws 1,000 meters at her. Like, if you can launch spears like that, it's weird that he didn't take out the Fellowship when they were standing in the middle of the frozen lake. But Dany drives away. Jon gets pulled into the water, and his sword is just sitting there outside of the water, and all of a sudden he bursts out of the water. It's like, how did he live? How did Jon live when he fell in the water? He fell in with a bunch of whites, so like, you'd think they'd be pulling him down. But no. Comes out, gets his sword, he's limping a bunch, he can't really move.
He's pretty frozen.
And then the whites that are walking around see him, and they start walking towards him when a horse jumps out of the distance with a fire on a chain that it's swinging around, hitting them with, taking them out. It turns out it's Uncle Benjen. So Jon didn't know that Uncle Benjen was a half White Walker, which is a weird story point in and of itself. I wonder how that would play out in the books. But he sends Jon off on this horse, says, "Ride for the pass," sends him back, and then he gets engulfed by a group of whites and disappears. And I was left there thinking, okay, that's the last we see of Uncle Benjen.
Well, it looks like they maul him.
Like, he's, you know, like Serial Pharrell style, except you actually see it. Except, you know, he's not dead, so who knows? Maybe he'll be making another appearance. I would find that pretty far-fetched.
I mean,
I think he's done. Like, if he could live through that, then he can just...
Yeah, Benjen seems to have an uncanny ability to save his nephews when they most need it. So
yeah, so very interesting. So then back at Eastwatch by the sea, the Hound has one of these whites, and he's going to get ready to... He's loading it up in a boat, getting ready to bring it down to King's Landing. By the way, for anyone who's joined us, feel free to drop some comments below and ask us any questions. We'd be happy to discuss those points. We're really interested to have a discussion here about the things that are going on. So back at Eastwatch, they're loading things up. Dany's dragon is flying over that portion of the wall, and Dany is standing there with Jorah looking out into the forest beyond the wall, and basically very sad and somber, and she's, I guess, just hoping that Jon would come back. Jorah says it's time to go, and sure enough, the minute she turns around and walks away, Jorah says, "Oh, who's that on the horse coming out of the forest?" And it's Jon, and they know it's Jon. She could tell it's Jon, and I remember thinking at this point, I was like, where did she get that outfit? The outfit for going north of the wall. It looks like snow. It was like her White Walker sling uniform. Anyway, so you see Jon riding back, and you just see this relief on her face that I definitely found pretty moving emotionally. They get Jon back in this room, and they're like cracking his clothes off of him because they're all frozen. And Davos, they're getting him undressed and going to start healing him. And Dany's just watching this all go down. And you could tell that she's incredibly sad, and she's hoping the best for him. And then she sees these scars all over his chest and his heart. And at this point, I think she's got to be asking herself, who the hell is this guy? Because she thinks very highly of herself, and she knows that she's great, and she's surrounded by greatness, but she has never met anyone like this. Like, she's been with Khal Drogo, who no one could take out in a fight. He was like, he died way too young. We would have loved to have seen him go against the Hound in the Mountain and Jaime with a hand. But you got this great warrior and this great guy who is just incredible. So then Sansa is going through Arya's stuff back at Winterfell to try to find that note. She wants that gone because that's going to be potentially used against her, so she thinks. And then she starts finding all these faces. Next thing you know, she's pulling out Walder Frey's face out of this very nice leather bag that Arya had. I want one of those. So then Arya is standing there behind her and confronts her. They have a little bit of a conversation. Arya explains to her, I got these faces when I'm training and I can wear them. And
at this point, Sansa is like, WTF. Who are you? What have you done with my baby sister? This is just messed up.
It's messed up. Like, Arya basically became one of the most
influential,
just like powerful killers. Like, she went at it with Brienne in that last episode or 2 episodes ago. That was a pretty cool scene. But I mean, she's the faceless men are notorious. Like, people, you would, if you wanted a king dead, you would do it through the faceless men. Except only the very, very richest could even afford their services. And now Arya has basically got all that power. She can just she just snuck up behind Sansa. All of a sudden, she's in the room. Didn't even hear her open the door. She back earlier on, she snuck up on Walder Frey and killed him in a very cruel way, gruesome way, and then she killed his entire family impersonating him, just like without leaving a single mark.
I think in each episode since Arya and Sansa have been reunited, they've just been showing more. Arya has been proving to Sansa more and more how much power and how strong she is. So first she has the fight with Brienne, and she's showing that she's then she's showing her physical strength. Then she's showing a little bit of manipulation and intellectual strength, and now she's really like at a whole new level.
Yeah. So, and Sansa's just kind of like, what are faceless men? What are you talking about? Like, she hasn't even heard of this stuff. Most people haven't, and we hadn't until a few seasons in, a few books in. At first, they sounded like some legendary myth. Turned out to be real. So at the end of this scene, Arya is walking towards Sansa with the knife in hand, and she says, like, I could find out what it would be like to be you. I always wanted to know what it would be like. And all I would need to do is take your face and find out. And you're wondering, is she going to kill Sansa here? I didn't think she was going to.
No, me neither.
But they definitely made me feel like I was going to. And then she hands her the knife and says nothing. She just gives her the knife and walks away and leaves her there. It was pretty strange.
Yeah, like, why is she giving her a knife and leaving her in her own?
It's almost like she's trying to make a point to her or something.
Yeah.
Like, she's not trying to she's not trying to turn the whole North against her or to kill her or anything. It's like she's trying to make a greater point.
But I do really think Sansa's learned her lesson a little bit. Like, you know, she's had a pretty messed up last few seasons, and yes, everyone really hated her in the first season, the first 2 seasons, but she's really been an unlucky character, and I think she's learned her lessons and hopefully learned her loyalties.
She's been loyal, and she's had her loyalties. It's just she's gotten taken advantage of and gotten beaten really hard. Even, you know, after she joined Littlefinger in the shows, which, you know, this is ahead of the books already, but she joined Littlefinger. It looked like she came dressed out in dark, and it looked like, oh, she was going to be a player of the game now. And then, sure enough, she just ended up getting raped and destroyed by Ramsay Bolton. Right, broken right back down. And she hasn't really had that. I haven't felt that same sense of strength from her since then, but she's been building up and building up. And now she's the Lady of Winterfell. Although, again, you know, she's got nothing on Arya, who's prancing around and kind of controlling her. And at the same time, she's still dealing with Littlefinger, who, you know, he's got to be using her at some level.
Yeah.
Unless she's using him. Maybe she's the one who's in control at this point. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see, but we hope that she doesn't make the same mistakes. So then, one of the last scenes, you have Jon waking up, and Dany's sitting there, and she's sitting beside him. And the
first thing he says is he's so sorry. He's so sorry about one of her dragons and that she had to go. And this really shows like a whole different, you know, it really shows Jon's compassion and Jon's character. And, you know, there's some hand holding and some tears, and all of a sudden Jon calls her Dany out of nowhere. You know, nobody's called her Dany, and she says that. And he says, "What else should I call you? Queen?" So he's basically listening. If you remember from earlier, Tormund actually says, you know, talks about Mance Rayder and how he wouldn't bend the knee, and he had too much pride, and look where that got him. So we knew that.
And look how many people had to die for his pride, basically.
And we at that point, I really knew that Jon was going to bend the knee to Dany after the episode, like in this episode, because of that moment.
Yeah. You know, I wasn't sure because I thought maybe they would kind of join forces. Maybe she'd be like they'd both be bending the knee together.
I think it could be because she's the one who says, "I'm gonna fight them with you." So they're both. Yes. They both came in as super stubborn, and they are totally on the same page. And you know, there's hand holding, and sparks are flying, and we see her touching. We see Jon touching her ring. Does that ring have any significance?
Not that I can think of. And yeah, back to that also. She, what did she say to him? She said, "What about your people? Like, they're stubborn people. They're not, you know." It wasn't that he didn't want to bend the knee earlier. It's that he has an allegiance of a whole part of the country, and he can't just bend the knee to someone else. He'll lose all that allegiance. So when she asks him that, "But what about your people? Like, they're not going to follow me." And he basically says, like, when they get to know you, they'll see you for what you are and see how great you are. Mm-hmm. So he's been totally convinced about how great she is. And I think the same thing happened to him.
Yeah.
Because, you know, so he's been convinced, and, you know, she's really been convinced by all these things he's done. Plus, then she saw the stab wounds on the heart. So then it cuts back to north of the wall, and you see all these whites walking with these giant chains, and you're wondering, what's going on? I didn't know they had metal up there. But they have these thick chains, and they're pulling something out of the lake, and it turns out to be the dragon. And there's been a lot of theory on this about ice dragons. There's a theory that there's an ice dragon buried under Winterfell. And then there was a theory that the Night's King would kill one of the dragons and then raise them as a White Walker dragon. and it appears that that's what's maybe going on. Clearly, the magic north of the wall is very powerful, but dragon magic is also very powerful. So you're wondering, what kind of power does he have over this ancient giant beast of fire? And then he puts his hand on the dragon. The focus changes, and you see the dragon's eye, and then it's closed eye, and then the eye opens, and
It's blue.
it's blue.
That was a very, very, very chilling moment.
Very chilling moment. These dragons, from a couple episodes ago when Danny first used the dragons, I was really reminded of, you know, the history of war is just terrible, and if you read accounts of real people, it's always so gruesome and just really terrible. But it really reminded me of some of the accounts I heard of the battles in World War I in Flanders Fields. Some of these terrible battles where there's just fire everywhere and people getting blown to smithereens, and you had a real shell shock because the sound were just so loud, and they were out there for days at a time, no sleep, completely dirty, underfed, and it's just like this terrible scene of people using weapons of mass destruction. Had the same feeling when I read accounts of nuclear weapons being used. Like, just the amount of destruction was so immense. And that's what these dragons were doing. They're just blowing up everything. And she's got 3 of them, but boom, now she's only got 2, and one of them's on the bad guy's side. Like, that's scary. It's like, imagine the U.S. had, you know, 3 nuclear weapons, and then Hitler got one of them.
Crazy.
So it was very chilling to see that blue eye open up.
So it's really, I think, going to be now dragon versus dragon, and maybe Danny will have special power because this is her child. Special power over this dragon, to, even though it's become a white.
A white? Yeah, I think it's probably just going to be a bad guy, or it's going to be a white. I don't even know if the whites are bad guys because
we don't really know what they want.
We don't know what they want. We know that this story is not trying to be a classic hero versus villain, good versus evil. Every character that we think is bad, like Jamie, eventually we see things from their perspective. So we're not sure what the whites want, but it's definitely, I think it's going to be on their side now. So that was the episode. It was a really great one. The major themes, I think, the major things that I think needed to be talked about were, how is it that some parts of the story are just moving so quickly and rapidly. For example, when they were in the middle of that frozen lake, and you know, 1 second they're in this frozen lake far north of the wall, and then, you know, after one overnight, Danny's there with her dragons, which took so much. It took Ginger getting all the way back there, it took a raven getting to Danny, then Danny deciding to go and flying all the way there. And how did she even find them, by the way? I just felt like, for the sake of the greater story, we're at this point now where we're just cutting through things really fast and not looking into those details.
A lot of the theories, like the theories that were so talked about in the earlier seasons, you're kind of just not even thinking about them. Like, only the real big theory has come to fruition. So, like, a lot of the smaller details have totally been, you know, forgotten. But I guess that's the difference between a television show and a book. But yeah, it was a pretty crazy episode, and it's even crazier that there's only 1 episode left in this season. But do you have anything else you want to talk about this episode? Or
I think we can cut it off here. We'll see.
We'll stay. How about we'll stay until 11:30. If anyone has any questions, you can answer them. So that's 11:30 at Eastern Standard Time.
We'll see if any questions come up. But if you come across this video later,
feel free to leave a comment.
Leave a comment. Ask us a question in the comment. There's so much to talk about. I didn't notice many Easter eggs in this one. It was just
The only thing that I thought was when Tormund was talking about Mance Rayder saying, you know, he didn't bend the knee and look at how many people lost their lives, and then that would just totally was dealt with at the end where we saw John. The only other things that, I mean, what's going on in King's Landing.
Yeah,
so I think that was also setting us up for the next episode, because this episode was, you know, predominantly in the north. So I think the next episode will be in King's Landing. And I think Dany and Jon will probably get to King's Landing next episode in the way this timeline has been happening.
Yeah, probably get there. I don't really know what the plan is, like, and I don't like that plan either. Like, they just have so much power right now, and
yeah,
I get that they don't want to build a new country on mass murder, but on the other hand, I don't know how they're going to go into those Lannister lands and stay safe.
But we will see.
But we will definitely see. What do you think is going to happen in the next episode? You know, let us know in the comments, because I could honestly see Jon and Dany going back to Winterfell. I could see them going back to Dragonstone. I could see them going to King's Landing.
They have this white now, so.
Yeah, so let's maybe do like a big summary of the whole episode, because that was kind of one of the outcomes in the end was they ended up with this white. They were successful, and now they have that. So basically, last episode, they came up with this plan that they could capture a white, bring it back south of the Wall, and then convince the Lannisters, namely Cersei, that they need to team up together. So they sent this group out. In this episode, the group is finally north of the Wall, and they are going out. They end up finding a group of whites. They capture one of them. As they're trying to bring it back, they get attacked by, I guess that was the entirety of the White Army, because the Night's King was there. They were all there. They end up getting screwed until Dany saves them on her dragons, except one of the dragons dies. Jon just barely makes it back by Uncle Benjen's cold hands saving them. I thought that was an Easter egg, by the way. You saw his hands, and they were black. And in the books, we have heard of cold hands, but we didn't know that it's Uncle Benjen yet. Maybe it's not going to be in the books, but his black hands, I thought, were a bit of a throwback to that. So then Jon gets back. Him and Dany basically say they're in this together, and they have this white that they're going to bring to King's Landing. So a lot happened, but only in those couple storylines. And no Bran, no King's Landing, no Dorne. I guess
Dorne's gone.
I guess Dorne's gone. No Highgarden. I definitely really enjoyed it. As always, I was sad when it was over.
I guess another thing we can just also touch on is I think that it was interesting when Tyrion brought up what's going to happen after Daenerys dies if she doesn't have children. So I think that was planting something for the future. Not necessarily that she's going to die. That would be a huge shocker. But just what's going to happen and how are we going to come to that. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't read so much into that. I kind of thought he was just being very realistic and saying, like, you have this great vision and you want to build this world, and I agree with you and we need to do it, but I'm worried, like, you're doing all these risky things and, like, your plan is more important than me or you. We need to make it happen. But it was kind of weird. Like, why bring it up now? Anyway, so we'll see what happens with that. So yeah, so that's it for our live stream. If you're watching this after the live stream's over, which you most likely are, then feel free to leave us a comment below. Let us know what you thought of the episode, what you thought about some of these main points that we talked about. Are certain timelines moving too fast? Are they focusing too much on certain things that don't matter? Like the Arya Sansa timeline, why spending so much time on that when they jump around so much in some of the other timelines? What about some of these other characters? Like we had that question by Lincoln. Why didn't Bran help them? Why didn't Bran send anything when they were stuck out on that rock? Why didn't he get the message? Why is he just absent in a time where they could really use his powers? And what do you think about this white, blue-eyed dragon? What's going to happen with that? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the Game of Thrones discussion soon.
Take it easy.